You cannot really change your life from the ego perspective. The ego will always pull you back, always doubt, always stop you. And that devotional love is a great, great way to devote it to something bigger than yourself, to make this your mission, to do something that's bigger than your little ego. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. I'm Deborah Burnt Maldonado. I'm here with Dr. Rob Maldonado, and we have an exciting episode for you today, continuing our series on the great minds of philosophy. And we're talking about Rumi today, which is one of my favorite philosophers, poets, and mystics. I want to remind you before we begin to subscribe to our channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, just press the button here in the corner. And if you are listening to us on one of the podcast services, don't forget to subscribe so you do not miss a single episode of Soul Sessions. We probably could talk hours about Rumi, but we'll try to keep it in a reasonable amount. But just wonderful, wonderful. Just reading his poetry just takes you to another place.
Yeah, he's a very popular poet. It's amazing to see how somebody from the Middle Ages can have such a big influence on current culture.
Yeah.
One of the points that I wanted to make about this, and we want to dedicate this to all our friends in the Middle East who have been great friends to us and our company throughout the years. We hope you understand that we mean our talk in respect and honor and in great admiration of Rumi's poetry and mind. He was a great student of mysticism, of course. And the point is that we need mysticism. There's nothing wrong with science and the rationale perspective, the kind of the logical perspective of let's weigh everything and let's measure it and let's figure out how things work. It's a great thing, no doubt. But we also have a mystical side in us that cannot be denied. If you deny it, if you suppress it, if you don't give people the ability to express that and to cultivate that, you're asking for trouble because human beings become lopsided, very, kind of materialistic and just focused on the external
and
world.
Super logical and rational. And I think we have, many people have lost that ability they crave it though, they crave it. That's why his work still is impactful on modern culture today, because it touches a soul in someone that awakens something in them. When I first read Rumi, I was thinking he was talking about a woman. He's in love, and it was this really romantic idea. But when you first met, you actually quoted a Rumi quote to me. Do you remember that? And just like it was just so rich with feeling and emotion and passion. And when I realized it was about God and about the love of the divine, it just gave it even a bigger kind of shifted me to read it that way. And just a beautiful, beautiful contribution to our world. And when we talk about what it is, it's a deeper philosophy that's carried from way before he was born.
Yeah, that's another important point about Rumi, is that he wouldn't be possible without the culture. The culture creates or sustains the individual. Then the individual is able to give back through their contribution, through their unique way of channeling that culture. So there was a tradition of the arts already in the Middle East that Rumi was born into. The love of poetry, the love of dance and music, which he kind of took to new heights. And we're still talking about him today. So he was born in 1207 and died in 1273. 13th century Middle East. Can you imagine?
In Afghanistan at that time.
He was born in Afghanistan, and I think he lived in Turkey most of his life and did his work there. But Islam at that time was very different, and certainly Sufism, which is part of the tradition that he is from, was also in a different state of development or evolution. Very much open to other traditions, other cultures, very inclusive. And this love of art and beauty and poetry was very similar to what we know as Bhakti Yoga. It is a type of devotional yoga that is, it's a path in itself. It leads to the same place that the Raja Yoga or the discipline of meditation leads to, but in an emotional, artistic, creative way.
And so when we talk about Bhakti Yoga, that's from the Upanishads. It's a path to the divine.
Yes.
And so there's Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga is that devotional yoga. And as a Catholic growing up, that's sort of very similar to, like, we were devoted to Jesus and to God, and it was very devotional. You'd go to church and you're praying, and it's a very love of Jesus, love of God type of religion. So it kind of fit with how I was raised, is to honor and connect on that way in a loving way, like a love that I always felt. That it was just like I always felt, no matter what happened, what challenges I had in life, that there was like this love, like I was loved by something greater than myself, and that Bhakti Yoga is about that, devoting your life to a spiritual practice, a spiritual path.
That's right. There is some question as to whether he was influenced by Eastern philosophy, like the Vedic traditions. But I think also that just like Jung would suggest, that all expression of mysticism touches upon the same points because of the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
That whenever you take that mystical approach to understanding life and the mind, you're going to find the same truths. And we see this over and over again, that mystics all over the world at every different time period come up with the same ideas, the same conclusions, that this spiritual essence is love, that it is one consciousness that we're all sharing. And so Rumi was tapping into this idea, and we certainly see it in his poetry.
And when you think of devotional love, just for how do we bring that into modern day life? And they talk in the Eastern philosophy about the kleshas, like the hindrances in life. And one of them is to identify with the ego. And that devotional love, we have to make a shift between loving our ego so much and making our ego like the center of our life versus handing our life over to a higher element in us, not an external element, but a higher aspect of ourselves. And that's what we're doing with devotional love. We're basically sacrificing our human needs and our foibles that we have in life to something greater than ourselves. And when people do great things in the world, it's out of that devotional love. Like Gandhi wasn't worried about not eating and his own personal physical health or needs. He was basically giving up for a bigger mission. And so we don't all have to do that, but we can think about ways that where we so self-involved in our ego, and how do you get out of the ego? If you're only just trying to shine up the ego and make it better, make it more positive, you're just moving sand around the sandbox. You're not really transcending. And devotional love is basically devoting yourself to that higher self, that higher principle.
Absolutely. So we have one of his great poems that has been really influential in our work, and it's translated by Coleman Barks. We'll post a link to some of his work because he's an incredible translator of Rumi's work.
So this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and enter them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. It's famous poem, The Guest House, and many people quote this. You've probably seen it over on your Instagram or Facebook, people quoting it. And it really is such a different way to think, because we're conditioned to get rid of the bad, make everything better, reject things that are uncomfortable. Just the whole ego does not want to be uncomfortable, so it's always pushing away these unpleasant parts of life.
Yeah, it's one of the characteristics of mysticism that we see people embrace the unity, the oneness, the non-dualistic nature of existence. And that's what Rumi is expressing here, that any emotion, including shame, malice, he says, invite them in. Laughing, essentially, non-judgment about good and bad. It's everything is welcome because everything is our mind. And if you take that approach, then you're not divided against yourself. You're not split. You're not creating shadow, as Jung would say.
It's almost like if you have a child and you only love them when they're good and when they act behavior. That doesn't happen. We have that unconditional love for our children, even when they're not behaving, or when they're struggling, or when they're sad, or when they're irritating us. And so it's about, like, why don't we do that for ourselves? Why do we compartmentalize our love and acceptance of ourselves only when the external is working out, or when we're only in a good mood, or when we're only feeling positive? This wholeness idea is so profound, because we're missing out on life, because sometimes those things that are irritating or sad or challenging help us appreciate when we do have the beauty of life too. Like you need both to really have a full, expansive life. And to not be afraid of it is actually more powerful than always being on guard and always being afraid of, like, the other shoe's going to drop.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some quotes that we can start to discern some of Rumi's spiritual teachings and ideas just in looking at some of these quotes that are taken from his poetry. The first one: out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. So again, non-dualism, right? He's
non-judgment.
Talking, drop the idea of good and bad, and let's go into the wholeness, the completeness of this human experience.
Well, that's the only way we can resolve our problems. So there's so much division with people in the world, and not all the world, like, it's magnified, of course, on the media, but, like, for us to really come together, even the people in our life that we disagree with, to come together from a place of non-judgment on both sides, and not feeling I'm right about something or you're wrong about something. And that's really what's going to bring a greater understanding. And if we can only speak to each other, we could probably uncover the truth that we both actually believe the same things and want the same things. Yeah. So I've often seen this quote as a way to describe forgiveness. But that's a tricky thing, because with forgiveness, you're actually saying that you did something wrong, but I'm going to forgive you for it. So there's still a little judgment when you use forgiveness. I mean, it's like almost like an elevated level, like beyond just forgiveness. It's an elevated place where we understand that what happens to the ego is not as real as we think it is, and that there's another place where we both are that has not been touched by that experience from that exchange with that person. And think about the people in your life that you have struggles with, like family members or exes or future, people that you meet, that you work with, and even those little conflicts that you have. Imagine seeing them with non-judgment, and them seeing you with non-judgment, and what could happen, and the intimacy that can be created from that.
Yeah, and this makes sense because we know that we all share the same mind, the same life experience in essence, and so if we understand, if we approach others' behavior from that perspective, we understand that if we were to change place with them, meaning we would put ourselves in their shoes, right? Experience their life the way they experienced it, we would act the same way. We would act the way they are acting. And that's a hard pill for us to swallow, right? That we want to think, no, I would be different. I would do things differently. Yes, but if you were them, in other words, if you experienced what they experienced and were conditioned and thought and given the genetic predispositions that they were given, you would essentially act the same way that they are acting.
I see this with daughters of critical mothers. And then if you look at I always ask my clients if they have that critical mother, how is her mother to her? Like, what was your grandmother like? Well, she was kind of that way too. And it's like, you see that it didn't start with her, and that it's almost, and not to let her off the hook, like in a way like, oh, it's okay, but it's more like you're understanding why they act that way, and you stop taking it personal. You stop making it about, well, if I was a better daughter, or if I achieved more, she wouldn't criticize me, or getting her to change so I can feel good. It's like understanding, and then that understanding starts to help you maybe repair that relationship, and letting her feel more love and an ability to give you love if you can give love back that way. So a very interesting dynamic. What's the next one, Rob?
The next one is the wound is the place where the light enters you. Mm-hmm. So this quote expresses Rumi's belief that pain and suffering can serve as catalysts for spiritual growth and illumination.
Well, people don't just go and I'm going to grow spiritually. It usually is there's a triggered event or a crisis in your life that leads you to ask more questions. I mean, maybe there's some people that were born with this mystical idea and we're always hungry, but in my experience, there's always been something like not necessarily an event, but a kind of a dissatisfaction in life, or even a crisis, a change in life, a death of a person, or a loss of a job, or a breakup, or something happening that makes you ask those bigger questions. And that's like, because if everything was going smoothly in your life, the spirit can't come in, because you're just happy with the material. You're happy with, everything's good in my life. I don't need to ask those deeper questions. There's no, if everything's satisfied on an ego level, it's when it's not that we seek something beyond the ego.
Yeah. So his saying gets at this universal fact of suffering, that if you exist in a human body, you're going to experience pain and suffering. It's inevitable. It's just part of the deal, right? That if you have a body, you're going to suffer. The question is, what do we do with that? We can let it defeat us. We can kind of let it lead us into despair, or we can do something with it. We can use it to motivate ourselves to seek deeper ground, the deeper ground of spirit. And that's what Rumi is getting at, that these so-called wounds, and he means that metaphorically, not just physical wounds or psychological, emotional wounds, but the places where we feel suffering, and in general the human condition of suffering leads us into those deeper parts of ourselves, right? We become seekers, and we go on those journeys of exploration and wishing to find answers to these deeper questions.
And which is why the guest house is so important, is that you don't want to not let these in, because they're guides for you. I like the next one. You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? We forget who we are. We forget that we're just these incredible spiritual beings, and we're basically struggling in darkness. And his work is about opening your eyes.
Yeah, definitely. You see in this quote the kind of the moving beyond the limited mind that we all kind of are born into and conditioned into by society. It's limited, and it's not that it's trying to hurt us, or that society is necessarily trying to hurt us. It's that in learning to fit in, and learning to survive, and learning to be a good citizen, that entails a limitation on us, because we have to play by external rules. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. In Jungian psychology, it's understood that you have to create this persona. You have to survive. You have to follow your ego, in a sense, to survive and to fit in socially, but that there's more to you than that. That you're supposed to go through a metamorphosis at some point, hopefully in your midlife, or after your mid-20s, you start to transform yourself inwardly and go beyond the limitations of your social, cultural conditioning.
There's only so much satisfaction you can squeeze out of the world. That's really the key, is that there's only so much, and it's not lasting, and we're going to a deeper place. We're transcending. I was thinking about this idea of devotional love, and you know how we feel when we fall in love just romantically? There's just like we're transcended to another place. we feel like this invincibility almost, this like beautiful, like floaty, amazing feeling. And why not use that kind of passion that we can naturally feel? All the human beings have the capacity for that towards something greater than ourselves. Like that's what I love about Rumi is like this love of self, this of the higher self, like loving that and using kind of a romantic ideal around this, romanticizing your higher self, falling in love in that deep way. And emotion is so important because I think a lot of times philosophy, you can get into the logical, ooh, that makes sense. Like Marcus Aurelius, very, very logical stoicism. And then you think about Rumi and he's just so feeling and like this is the meat of life. And it's just so much different. And so I really think that that's how we transcend the ego in romantic love, because we're willing to like give up ourselves for another person. Like we forget about our ego for a moment and we're transcended. So why not use that mechanism that we're naturally born with to connect to the divine instead of just projecting it onto the next attractive person that you meet. Let's go to the next one, which is about love. Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray.
That's right. So following this inner passion, right? The desire you have, and trusting in it. When we work with people, often we find that they're not trusting in their own inclinations, what they love to do, what they know that fulfills them. Because of that limited conditioning of life, they are often taught that you can't do what you really love, that those things are for certain people. If you're lucky somehow, by chance, maybe
lottery.
Some people get to do what they love. But it's the opposite. It's that these inclinations, this love, these passions that we have are precisely to guide us in our life. They are our North Star. They are our compass. They are meant to guide us in life in every step of our way, and to express that fullness of who we are. And trusting in that. It has to be cultivated because of that limited mindset. We have to trust and develop that cultivation, or cultivate that trust. And one of the ways to do it is through bhakti, through this devotional love, this dedicating our skills, our work, our creative endeavors, like Rumi is talking about, to the divine, to this spiritual work.
What I think that makes people successful is that ability to transcend their ego needs, the love of comfort, the love of safety, the love of predictability, because there's a bigger mission that other people are depending on me to step into this like non-logical, outrageous dream that we have to, like Steve Jobs says, here's to the crazy ones, as people are willing to like put their ego aside and really go for their dreams, because that's really what it takes. You cannot really change your life from the ego perspective. The ego will always pull you back, always doubt, always stop you. And that devotional love is a great, great way to devote it to something bigger than yourself, to make this your mission, to do something that's bigger than your little ego.
Absolutely.
And the last one, the moon stays bright when it doesn't avoid the night.
Oh, yeah.
You see the moon during the day, it kind of blends in with the sky, and you're like, oh, there's the moon. But at night, it shines bright.
Yeah, so symbolically, the night, of course, represents the unconscious, the unknown, also kind of our animal instinctual life, that we have to embrace that as part of ourselves. If we split it, if we say, I'm only the civilized person that lives in society and lives by that persona, you're limiting yourself. You're not in touch with your power that connects you to nature, to the passion of life. And that's what he's talking about, that you have to embrace both light and darkness. Again, this non-dualistic approach to working with your mind. And
so when you read Rumi, a bit of advice that you don't just read it, you contemplate it. And I think we're all used to like collecting information, but what the right way to study philosophy is that you read it and you like even just one of the quotes and just sit with it, meditate on it, ask yourself about it, and that's where you really get it to be embodied in you, versus just reading it and, oh, that's a beautiful quote, and let's move on to the next one. Really allowing yourself to process what the deeper message is.
Absolutely. It's a way of integrating that knowledge into kind of living it, right? Making it one with your mind. And that's one of the hallmarks of mystical literature, is that it's a living word. Every time you read it, you see something different. And this is uncanny, because when you read the Gita, when you read Rumi, when you read the Upanishads, any higher knowledge, every time you read it, you will see and experience something different. And therefore, this is the living spiritual work right here. Because what is happening is that language itself is a symbolic form, right? There are these little symbols laid down on a page, and your mind is deciphering them, meaning you're giving them life, you're giving them thought and consciousness, awareness. And that is what you are experiencing when you read. It's not just a passive experience. It's a very active experience of transforming symbols into thought, into life. So you're giving it life. So what is higher knowledge doing? It's enlivening you. It's waking
like stimulating something, right?
Yeah, it's waking you up, literally. It's illuminating your mind from within. And that is what you want to practice. So Rumi's work, Bhakti Yoga, just thinking of it as creative endeavors, right? He was very much into dancing, that twirling around, poetry, music, singing, drinking wine even, right? Because it loosens up a kind of that creative spirit in you. When you do that, and you dedicate it towards this enlightenment, this kind of living process of waking up yourself, then you're cultivating that.
And even Einstein said everything is imagination. So he even knew, even though he was a scientist, he knew the power of thinking mystically, to imagine and to open up that mind to other places, transcending the ordinary life or evidence of the senses. And so we can invite that into our lives every day, and reading this higher knowledge, helping you connect. I always feel like, even if I don't understand what I'm reading, it's affecting me. There's something, and it comes around, and you read it maybe 10 times before you realize you really get it sometimes. And so if you read something and you're like, what are they talking about? You keep reading it, keep doing your life, keep studying higher knowledge, and then all of a sudden, I kind of know what this means now. But the seed has been planted, and it's ready to grow. One of the other quotes that I love, just to end with this quote, is like, why do you cry that it's dark? You're the one who put your hands over your eyes. And so it's this idea that we have the power to open our eyes. We have the power to see ourselves and the world in a greater vision, and other people transcending their own egos as well. And instead of that judgments and they're never going to change, what if you just open your mind to a new possibility for your life changing, for their lives changing, for all the suffering in every relationship and life struggles to be transcended.
That's right. So here's to the poets.
Yes, here's to the poets. And we will continue our series next week with another great mind. But I hope you enjoyed this episode today. And if you have, please click the button here. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. If you are watching or listening to us on the podcast services, don't forget to subscribe. We have great episodes every week. And we dedicate this to our friends in the Middle East that have explored this type of mysticism, and then anyone in the world who's been touched by Rumi and want to go deeper into his work and bring that into your life.